My name is Greg Dalton, and until recently, I was the operations manager at Morris Industrial Solutions, a company that manufactured specialized factory equipment for nearly 2 decades. At 58. I wasn't flashy, didn't have a big office or a loud voice in meetings. I was just the guy who kept things running, quietly, consistently, effectively. I trained most of the staff, many of whom had started fresh out of high school. They knew me as the steady hand behind the scenes. That morning, everything changed. It's time for a new direction. We don't need dead weight, Leah Morris said, flipping her hair like she was casting off something annoying. She had just taken over the company after her father, Richard Morris, retired 3 weeks earlier. Leah was 29. Armed with a business degree and 2 years of experience working at a startup in Austin. She called herself a modernizer, but really, she just wanted to erase anyone who remembered how the company used to run. I didn't argue. Didn't even blink. I simply nodded and walked out of her office. No shouting match, no threats. Just packed my things while everyone else in the office avoided eye contact. Some of them looked like they wanted to say something but didn't. After all, when the boss's daughter swings the axe, people keep their heads down. I carried my box of memories and paperwork out to my truck. 18 years of loyalty condensed into a few personal items and a couple framed photos. But while Leah thought she'd just crossed my name off some spreadsheet, she hadn't looked closely enough at the paperwork that really mattered, my employment contract. And that's where she made her first mistake. Because what Leah didn't realize, and hadn't even bothered to review, was that Richard Morris himself had insisted on a clause in my contract, a clause that guaranteed me 2 full years of salary as severance if I was ever let go without documented cause. Not a suggestion. A legally binding agreement. And I was going to collect every penny. I sat in the driver's seat of my truck, the box of office belongings beside me, staring through the windshield at the production floor I had helped build from the ground up. Machines I'd maintained. Systems I'd designed. Teams I'd trained. And now it was all behind me. But unlike most firings, this one came with a golden parachute. Leah just didn't know it yet. Back home, I called Martin Ellsworth, a longtime friend and one of the sharpest corporate attorneys I knew. We'd played poker together for years, and he'd often joked he was waiting for the day I needed a clean, no-drama corporate takedown. This was it. Martin met me the next morning at my kitchen table. My contract lay open between us, highlighted and tabbed. He pointed to the crucial clause. In the event of termination without documented cause, the employee shall receive severance compensation equal to 24 months of current base salary. Greg, this clause is bulletproof, he said, tapping the paper with a pen. They'll either pay you, or we'll take it to court and they'll pay me too. It wasn't just about the money. Richard Morris had added that clause years ago to keep me from being poached by a competitor. I remembered him saying, "You're the backbone here. If someone wants to take you, they're gonna have to pay up." Richard had believed in loyalty and in rewarding the people who made the company what it was. His daughter? Not so much. I looked out at the backyard. The oak tree my late wife and I planted when we first bought the house stood tall and full. We'd cared for it through storms and droughts, watched it grow strong over the years. Just like I'd done with the company. And now, after being dismissed like yesterday's news, I realized this fight wasn't just about severance. It was about principle. About reminding people like Leah that experience still matters, that loyalty can't be replaced by buzzwords and spreadsheets. And that burning a bridge doesn't mean the other side disappears. The morning after I filed the claim with Martin, I got a call from Richard Morris himself. I hesitated before picking up. 18 years of loyalty don't vanish overnight. But part of me wasn't sure what he'd say. "Greg," he said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "What the hell happened yesterday?" "Maybe ask your daughter," I replied, keeping my tone even. I did. He sighed. She said you were resistant to change. That you were undermining her in front of the staff. I let the silence stretch. Richard knew me better than that. He knew I'd never cause internal drama or sabotage anyone, especially not the people I'd mentored. You're going to move forward with legal action, aren't you? He asked finally. Already did. I told him. Martin's handling it. Another long pause. Then Richard said something that caught my attention. I warned her to check your contract before I stepped down, he said. Almost like he was talking to himself. Told her protections were in place for a reason. She didn't listen, I replied. Apparently not, he said with a heavy breath. She let you go. Then Thomas. Then Jennifer. Anyone over 50. My jaw tightened. Thomas Reynolds, our head of engineering, had been with the company for 12 years. Jennifer Ellis, who ran quality control like it was her own private lab, was irreplaceable. And Leah tossed them aside like they were obsolete files on a hard drive. Is this really what you wanted, Richard? I asked. Is this what you built Morris Industrial for? No, he said quietly. But I gave her control. It's hers now. I can't step in, not without making things worse. I heard voices in the background, Leah's sharp tone unmistakable, and then the line went dead. I stared at the contract still on the table. The clause was airtight. The law was on my side. But as I sat there, something shifted in me. This wasn't just about me getting what I was owed. It was about all of us. About standing up for the people who'd been tossed aside. And maybe, just maybe, about building something better. By noon that same day, I'd made calls to every veteran employee Leah had axed. Some were stunned into silence. Others were furious. All of them were worried. I gave them the same advice: take a breath. Check your contracts. Call Martin. Most didn't even realize they had rights. Thomas had a clause for 1 year's severance. Jennifer's contract included a payout for early termination. Leah had assumed no one would push back. But now they were starting to. After that, I made one more call, to Douglas Keene. Owner of Keene Precision Manufacturing, a mid-sized company across town. He and I had talked before, casually over coffee at trade shows. He'd tried to recruit me several times over the years. Each time, I'd politely declined. I was loyal to Richard Morris. But Richard wasn't in charge anymore. Still interested in that conversation? I asked when Douglas picked up. He didn't even hesitate. Let's talk. 3 days later, I was sitting across from Leah and her corporate attorney in a sleek downtown office. Martin was beside me, calm and prepared. Leah didn't even glance at me as she launched into some speech about organizational shifts and strategic restructuring. Martin simply slid my contract across the table and pointed to the clause. Termination without documented cause. Her lawyer, a young guy named Evan, started sweating as he flipped through a thin folder looking for any sign of performance issues, warnings, or documentation. There was none. We'll offer 6 months, Leah said sharply. Martin closed his briefcase. We'll see you in court. Discovery will be very enlightening, especially your decision to fire every employee over 50 in a single day. That got her attention. Evan leaned over and whispered something. Leah waved him off. You're making threats. No, I said calmly. I'm setting expectations. That's when the door opened. Richard Morris walked in. He looked older, thinner, like the last few months had worn him down. Leah, he said quietly, a word. She looked stunned. We're in the middle of something, Dad. Now. Through the glass wall, I watched their exchange, his hand gestures, her crossed arms. The growing tension. When they returned, Leah's jaw was tight, and she wouldn't look at me. "Evan," Richard said, "draw up the severance agreement. As written in the contract." I nodded once. Nothing else needed to be said. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The severance hit my account a week later, $312,000 after taxes. More money than I'd ever seen at once. It should have felt like a victory. But it didn't. It felt hollow. Because the money wasn't the point. Not really. That same afternoon, I met Thomas Reynolds at a quiet diner off Route 39. We'd worked together for over a decade, built entire product lines side by side, and trusted each other without question. Now, we were two cast-offs trying to figure out our next move. "Martin got me a year's severance," Thomas said, stirring his coffee. "Not as good as yours, but I'll take it. They want me to sign an NDA. 5 years?" I asked. He nodded. "No talk of proprietary tech, processes, nothing. 40 years in engineering and now you're supposed to pretend you don't know anything?" I shook my head and slid a business card across the table. "Keen Precision Manufacturing. Douglas's name at the top. He's looking for someone who knows precision hydraulics," I said. "No NDA. No red tape. Just real work." Thomas stared at the card like it was a life raft. "Greg, Harper would sue me if I joined a competitor." "Not if you're just consulting on industry standards," I said. "There's nothing proprietary about experience." He slowly pocketed the card. "What's really going on here? You're not the kind to stir things up." He was right. I hadn't told anyone about my plans. Not yet. But he deserved the truth. "I'm partnering with Douglas," I said. "We're launching a new division, custom hydraulic components. The high margin, small batch stuff Leah said was a waste of time." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "The work Charles said was our future." I nodded. "She's killing it to chase volume. Mass production she thinks can compete with overseas prices." "She can't," Thomas said flatly. "And she's too arrogant to see it." I leaned in. "Jennifer told me Leah's already started liquidating the custom machinery Charles bought last year. Over $2 million in equipment. Sold at auction." "Jesus," Thomas whispered. "She's stripping the company for cash. And guess who's buying property in Austin?" We sat there, silent, the weight of it all settling between us. "What are you gonna do?" he finally asked. I looked him in the eye. "Build something better." 2 months after I'd been shown the door at Morris Industrial, I was back in the game, only this time, I wasn't playing someone else's. I was building my own. Cornerstone Precision was the name we landed on. The idea came from Thomas, who said, "You build from the corners up if you want something to last." We were converting an old warehouse on the east side of Indianapolis into our new home base. It smelled of sawdust, oil, and opportunity. That morning, I sat in Douglas Keene's office going over supplier contracts. His desk was covered in paperwork, architectural plans, and machine specs. Douglas, with his rolled-up sleeves and rumbling voice, had backed our venture without hesitation. "First batch of components should be rolling off the line next month," he said. "And the CNC programmer starts Monday." I smiled. "Let me guess. Jason Wright?" Douglas nodded. "Said you recommended him." Jason had been one of the sharpest guys at Morris, brilliant with computer modeling and 3D simulations. Leah slashed his department's funding by 30% while doubling her own salary. He left 2 weeks after I did. "That makes 7 now," Douglas said, raising an eyebrow. 7 former Morris employees who've come over. "Only the best," I replied. "And the list isn't done yet." Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from Jennifer Ellis. Still inside the lab at Morris but quietly feeding me updates. She couldn't afford to leave yet, 3 years from retirement, but she could watch. And she was. The photo she sent was a memo. Production delays, quality control issues, and 3 major clients threatening to cancel contracts due to missed deadlines. I passed the phone to Douglas. Exactly what we predicted, he said. No satisfaction in it, I replied. A lot of good people are still over there. Families. Livelihoods. He nodded solemnly. We should reach out to Midwest Fabrication, I said. Naming one of Morris's biggest clients. Let them know we'll be operational in 60 days. I've already got a meeting scheduled next week, Douglas said, tapping his notepad. They're eager to talk. I stood and walked over to the wide window overlooking the warehouse floor. Equipment was being installed. New hires were training. The foundation was coming together. Then my phone rang. Richard Morris. I looked at the screen, then at Douglas. I should take this. He nodded and stepped out, closing the door behind him. I answered the call, unsure what to expect. Richard, I said. Greg, his voice was weary, a shell of the man I'd once worked beside. We need to talk. I'm listening. There was a long pause on the other end. Then came the sigh. I know what you're doing. The new company. The people you're bringing over. I've been hearing things. I stayed silent. Nothing we were doing was illegal or even unethical. We weren't stealing, we were offering a future to those Leah had discarded. I'm not calling to ask you to stop, Richard continued. I'm calling to ask for your help. That caught me off guard. What kind of help? The kind that might save what's left of my company, he said quietly. Leah's been selling off assets, cutting corners on quality. The board's concerned. So am I. Why tell me this now? Because you're the only one who knows every part of the operation. The only one who might see a path forward. And because, he hesitated. Because I should have listened when you told me she wasn't ready. I exhaled, slowly. The warehouse behind me buzzed with energy, new hires learning, machines being tested. The future was already happening here. What exactly are you asking, Richard? Come to my house tonight. 7 o'clock. Bring Thomas if he's willing. The board wants to meet, discuss options. Options? I asked. Yeah, he said, his voice gaining strength, including a change in leadership. I looked down through the glass at our growing operation. At the people who believed in this new beginning. At the company we were building, not to get even, but to get it right. I'll be there, I said at last. But I'm not promising anything. Fair enough. Richard said, the relief clear in his tone. And Greg? Yeah. Thank you, for still taking my calls. 6 months after being fired. I stood quietly in the back of the main conference room at Morris Industrial Solutions. The quarterly all-hands meeting was underway, and Leah was at the head of the table. Flanked by her new executive team, most of them barely into their 30s, all looking like they hadn't slept in days. The room felt tense, brittle. I wasn't supposed to speak until the end, that was the agreement. The board wanted to give Leah a fair shot to explain the company's sharp downturn, a 37% drop in revenue, 3 cancelled contracts. And a wave of resignations that left entire departments gutted. She blamed market volatility. She blamed outdated systems. She blamed legacy inefficiencies. She was halfway through a slick-looking presentation when she finally noticed me. Her expression froze. What is he doing here? She snapped, pointing in my direction. Richard, seated near the board members, gave a small nod to the chairman. Leah, the chairman said evenly, the board has reached a decision regarding the future of this company's leadership. Leah's face turned pale. You're not serious. The chairman turned toward me. Greg, would you like to explain the new arrangement? I stepped forward and placed a folder on the table, the same one Martin had once filled with severance paperwork. Only this time, the documents were very different. Morris Industrial is merging with Cornerstone Precision, I said, my voice calm and clear. As of this morning, the board has approved the acquisition. Leah let out a bitter laugh. I'm the majority shareholder. You can't do this. Richard stood slowly. No, Leah. You hold 20%. I retained 51%. And I voted in favor of the merger. Her mouth fell open as she grabbed the documents, flipping pages with shaking hands. Cornerstone will absorb Morris's custom hydraulics division, I added. The rest of the operation will continue under new leadership. At that moment, Thomas Reynolds stepped in from the doorway. Mine, he said simply. Leah's hands dropped to the table. This is, she began. I looked at her and finished the sentence for her. This is business. Nothing personal. A year had passed since the merger. And I found myself once again standing on an observation platform, only this time, it wasn't at Morris Industrial. It was at the newly expanded Cornerstone Precision and Morris Custom Hydraulics facility. Two companies once at odds, now operating as one. Below, the production floor moved like a well-oiled machine. Teams worked with focus and precision, blending decades of experience with modern efficiency. The sound of synchronized equipment was like a rhythm I'd almost forgotten I missed. Beside me stood Richard Morris, leaning on a cane. His health hadn't improved much, but there was life in his eyes again. He watched the floor with the pride of a man who'd seen something once broken come back stronger. Quarterly numbers just came in, he said, handing me a report. I scanned it, best performance in 5 years. Margins were up. Employee retention had stabilized. We'd filed 3 new patents in 6 months. Our reputation, once shaky under Leah's rule, was rising fast. Leah called yesterday, Richard said softly, his eyes still on the floor. From Austin. I raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. She started some kind of consulting firm. He added. Asked if I'd invest. I gave him a sidelong glance. Are you going to? He shook his head. Told her she should come back. Learn the business from the ground up, the way I did. The way you did. He gave a tired smile. She hung up. I chuckled. And then? She called back this morning, he said, watching Jason Wright train 2 new programmers. Asked if the offer still stood. I didn't ask for more. I didn't need to. Across the floor, I spotted Jennifer Ellis in her lab coat, inspecting parts with the same sharp eye she always had. Thomas was at a workstation, sketching a custom modification by hand, old school before he digitized it. It hit me then, this was the vision we'd always talked about. Not choosing between old and new, but letting them work together, experience and innovation, side by side. You know, Richard said, glancing at me, when I added that severance clause to your contract. I never imagined it would lead to all this. I smiled. Neither did I. We stood there for a while, Richard and I, watching something we both helped create evolve into something even greater. Not perfect, not easy, but resilient. Real. Cornerstone Precision and Morris Custom Hydraulics was no longer just a company, it was a symbol of what could happen when leadership respected the past and embraced the future. I thought back to the moment Leah fired me. The smug confidence, the careless dismissal of everything that came before her. She thought she was cutting dead weight. What she'd really done was rip out the roots. And you can't grow anything without roots. Down on the floor, Thomas was talking with a new engineering hire, someone fresh out of Purdue, eager and sharp. Jason was overseeing a test run of a new programmable system. Across the way, Jennifer was reviewing a report with 2 younger analysts. The generational divide Leah had tried to exploit was gone. In its place was something far more powerful: collaboration. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the message I'd received that morning from one of our newest clients. Looking forward to the partnership. Heard great things about your team. That said more than any financial report ever could. Richard leaned closer. You ever regret not walking away from all this when you had the chance? I shook my head. No. Money's nice. But meaning, that's what sticks. That's what lasts. He nodded, eyes distant. Some lessons are expensive, he said, echoing a line I'd heard him say years ago. But the ones that stick, I added, those are always worth the price. The hum of machines echoed around us, steady. Strong, unbroken. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace.